I'm Keith Francis, and I'm very pleased to be putting on this exhibition at the Greenville Arts Council with Nicole Dikon. Nicole and I have known each other for 8 years. When I was teaching at the University of Central Florida, she was a student in a painting class that I taught, and we have maintained a friendship ever since then. Uh, I think you'll find some common ground in the work. We both work with print media, though in vastly different ways. I'm primarily a narrative artist. I'm known in some cases as a book artist. I think Nicole's work is quite a bit more abstract than mine. Uh, Elegant levels of color and layered and inventive forms and shapes, and I think you'll really enjoy seeing that work. My work is, as I said, narrative and imagist, figurative. I don't work often in abstract forms. Most often I have a story to tell, and uh, even if it's an implied narrative, where the shapes of a canvas that are on a canvas have communications with each other. They're mute, and we're not privy to that conversation, but you can tell there is a conversation going on between the shapes. The works that are shown in this exhibition are primarily from three different bodies of work. The first body of work has to do with nature and landscape, and nature at its most intense and violent: deluges, floods, tornadoes. And the second body of work has to do with communication. And you'll see in this body of work the Tower of Babel appearing occasionally. I think we're at a really interesting time in this culture regarding communication. I don't believe there's ever been a time when the tools that were available to us to communicate, to send the information forward, have been so accessible. And we seem to be in a time where communication is really at a low point. People, not because of making the information available, but people refusing to listen to things that they don't agree with. So communication is an issue I'm concerned about. The third body of work is a far more surrealistic body of work called The Hanging Garden. And the landscape is a fourth dimensional landscape, and it involves time, the element of time. And there are a number of books I've written about this and printed. When I work on books, I really work in a very narrative way. I write the short stories, and the work that normally appears in a book is either an illumination, which is not an illustration, but a parallel form, or pure illustration for my ideas. I print the books letterpress, on presses that were functional in the late 1800s in some cases, old Chandler and Price presses and Vandercook cylinder-proof presses, and some hand presses, like a Franklin press. Anyway, I have a number of presses that are available to me here in the studio, and off to my right here you'll see a large etching press that a person named Bob Odell and I built back in the 70s. And it's produced a lot of big woodcuts over its time. Anyway, I hope that you'll have a look at all of the work that's hanging, and I hope you'll come back and look often and admire the work and think about the work from different points of view. Processes are important in printmaking, less important in my paintings. I generally use acrylic on canvas and layer it up, much like I layer the layers of ink in printmaking. But I use an etching process called galvanic etching, which is an electric process, and I use copper sulfate, which is biodegradable. It's not a harmful environmental material. I use electrical cathodes and anodes attached to the plate and to the in to two plates, the plate that I mentioned and the plate that's the metal is adhering to. And I use a ground of asphalt and beeswax and draw through that. And as the copper is electrically transferred from the plate to the sort of dummy plate where it adheres, it creates an etch line. And when you're looking at the etchings that are in the show, that's the process that generated those etchings. Often I'll watercolor those pieces. Another process I use, of course, is woodcut. There's some examples of those in the show, and I use power tools for that since that's the fastest way to remove wood. The third process I use is engraving with traditional engraving tools, like you'd engrave a shotgun or a piece of silver, something like that, hand burins. And I work on a material called Grave-Apply 2, which is a material that's a plastic material with a white surface and black interior, so that when I cut the surface away, I can see where the thickness and where my line is. And I just basically cut the material by hand and roll ink on the surface and print them in one of my presses. I use sometimes as many as 16 layers of color, which I think sounds crazy to a person using four-color process, or even crazier to a person working digitally today, where with a digital printer will generate that many 16 or 18 colors with no problem. In some of the books, I use digital color and set the type digitally. If I'm working on an edition of 10 books or something, it doesn't make a lot of sense to hand set the type and carve the woodcuts and things, unless there's some specific technical thing I want to express with those mediums. Anyway, as I said, I'm a narrative artist. There's two types of narrative. There's actual narrative, sequential narrative, which is storytelling. And the second type of work that certainly with the visual artist is implied narrative, where the shapes or the figurative elements of the painting are in a communication that only they are hearing. It's mute to us, the viewer. But we can tell there is narrative going on. There's information is being conferred from one character to the other, or from one shape to another. So I think that pretty much covers what's in this exhibition. As I said, I'm very pleased to exhibit here. I've had a number of friends that have shown here over the past few years, and all have been very complimentary about the Greenville Arts Council and their experience exhibiting the work. Thank you. Stay safe.